Hello, welcome back to my channel. And welcome to the 28th day of Chanmas. It feels so weird that we're almost done, but I am super excited to be bringing you this I Read 5 video where I'm going to be reading the 5 highest rated books on my Goodreads TBR. I did the lowest rated books version of this already. If you want to check that one out, I'll leave it down in the description. Or if you're interested in watching any of my I Read 5 videos, I'll leave those down in the description below as well. But today I am excited to be reading the highest rated books on my Goodreads TBR. I wanted to end this year on a high note and read some books that a lot of people have seemed to like. So that is what I am endeavoring to do today. I am going to pull up my Goodreads on my phone and screen record so you can see what books are on my Goodreads TBR, and we can both be surprised together. I am very interested to see what's so highly rated. I kind of take the attitude of just adding anything that sounds interesting to my Goodreads want to read shelf, so there's probably a lot of stuff there that I don't even recognize, but I'll be interested to check it out. So without further ado, let's get screen recording. Here's a screen recording right here. Let's start looking. The first few books I'm noticing are books that haven't been published yet. Typically these books are rated very highly as people are super excited for these titles, or they might be a title that a friend wrote and that you want to rate highly before the book comes out, I guess, to give it buzz. That's definitely the case for Ophelia After All and If You Change Your Mind. It is so wild to me that I know 2 soon-to-be published authors, like what? So excited about those, but obviously I won't be reading those for this video since they're not out yet, and I don't have my hands on copies of either of them. Same with Bloodmarked by Tracy Dion. As I scroll though, okay, I do actually have a copy of Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake, and I actually think it might be interesting to see what an unpublished work looks like. I mean, I've read ARCs before, but you know what I mean? Like, this one's so highly rated. I'm curious to see how it measures up to the other highly rated books that are already published. So I think we're gonna give this one a go. I think this is gonna be the first read that we pick up. It's gonna be Delilah Green Doesn't Care. This, I believe, is Ashley Herring Blake's adult contemporary romance debut, and it is sapphic from what I know, so I'm super, super excited for this one. I don't want to know more than that. I'm not going to look at the synopsis of any of these books, but I'm super excited for this one. Book Lovers by Emily Henry is not out yet, and I don't have a copy of that one either, so I'm not gonna read that one. But now we get into the books that are already published. So first up we have Real by Kennedy Ryan. I'm excited to read this one. I feel like this is going to be a really, really good book. I believe it's kind of set in old Hollywood. I don't know exactly the time period, but this I believe is a historical romance. Not like set in the 1800s, you know what I mean, but like kind of a modern day historical or modern-ish day. I'm excited to read it. I don't want to know much more than that. Next we have Let Me Love You, a McLean Brothers novel by Alexandria House. This is another one that I couldn't be more excited to be on this list because I love Alexandria House. I read some of her stuff this year. I read a different Brothers series. I can't remember what the brothers were, but Shu, Set, those books. Loved those, and they were like short novellas. I think this is a full-length novel. Don't quote me on that. I guess we'll figure it out together, but this one looks really, really promising, so I'm so excited about it. So I think that makes 3 books so far. I've already read Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I feel like sometimes Goodreads can be a little screwy, leaving things on your want to read shelf that you've already read, or maybe it's user error, I don't know, but I've already read this one, so we're not gonna read this. Next up though, okay. We have Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. I have this one on my physical TBR. It's like over here somewhere, and I am very much looking forward to reading this one. I was trying to save it for a middle grade reading vlog, but I feel like now's the time to do it. Why not read it now? I don't know that much about this one. I do think Amari goes to this like magical school setting and is trying to figure out what happened to her missing brother. We're gonna find out more in this video. And then it looks like the last one we're gonna be reading is not gonna be Drive, because I already read that one, but it's going to be The Perfect Catch by Megan Quinn. Now this should be interesting because I've read a couple of the books in the Brentwood Boys series and I loved them, but I hated the endings of both of the ones that I read. So I'd be curious to see if Megan Quinn has improved upon her endings as the series has gone on farther. I feel like there was a really big like time jump in the other books. Like you had the couple together and then they separated for 7 years and got back together, and I didn't like that, so I'm hoping that that's not something that happens in this book, but I guess we'll see. But those are the 5 books that we're going to be reading for this video. We have Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake, Real by Kennedy Ryan, Let Me Love You by Alexandria House, Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston, and The Perfect Catch by Megan Quinn. So I'm really excited about all of these books. Almost all of them are romance, which bodes well for me, and I think it's going to make for a really fun and upbeat video. So let's get into it. Let's get into the vlog portion of this video and see why these books are so highly rated. Okay, so I'm starting this vlog off with The Perfect Catch by Megan Quinn. I am 30% into this book, and it's honestly not what I was expecting. I feel like I maybe should have had some inclination that this was going to be a slightly more emotional read, because I think the 2 other books that I've read by her have been, you know, a little bit emotional and had kind of like an emotional thread in it, but this one is definitely a little different in tone than the other books that I've read in this series. This is technically a standalone novel set
in the, I was gonna say professional world, but it's a coworker kind of romance. Like the baseball player in this equation is not in school. He is a professional baseball player. So our main character, Walker, is, I think he's a catcher. There's a pitcher and a catcher. Yes, he's the catcher. And he has been kind of competing with the pitcher on his team since they were in high school. They don't like each other. They're kind of enemies. And Walker is doing kind of bad right now. He has just not been good at batting. And he's just not having a good time. He's in his 30s and he thinks he's going to be forced into retirement before he wants to be forced into retirement. He's just kind of a grumpy guy. You can tell that there's definitely more than meets the eye with him. And he definitely has some trauma in his past, but we don't get any sort of like insight into what that might be. We just get vague hints that it might have something to do with his sister or with his parents. Gotten just a mention of those things. And we have Kate, who comes to kind of shake things up. She is the new, I want to say like community organizer or something like that. She's the person who kind of puts on community events with the baseball players, like gets them to charity events and, you know, other things in the community. And she's trying to kind of break through Walker's like very intense, I don't want to say bubble, but like the shield that he puts up against people. He's not a dick, like he's not super mean, but you can just tell he doesn't want much to do with people. Yeah, their interactions have been pretty interesting. I think if you've watched Ted Lasso, I hate to compare everything to Ted Lasso, but this is very much like Roy Kent and Keeley vibes. There's not a whole lot of humor in it yet, but there's definitely that sort of like banter there and that interaction. And I can tell that our hero is like trying to work through some of his insecurities, and there's also, again, more than meets the eye with him. We know that he doesn't like the pitcher on his team, but he also tries to help him. So the pitcher, I can't remember what his name is, but he's an alcoholic, and our catcher, Walker, has been like covering for him for years. Yeah, I don't know. You can tell he's like a good guy at heart, but we haven't really gotten to see much of that yet. And I'll be curious to see how the romance plays out. I have liked the interactions between Kate and Walker. She's definitely a takes no shit kind of lady, but she's also not like stone cold or anything. She's just like, she's good at her job and she, you know, likes what she does. I feel like I'm lacking a little bit of the depth that I'm wanting. It's like if you're going to bring up these like kind of harder topics and you're going to kind of like hint at there being something more there, I want to feel more of that up front. I want a little bit more context in the story, but I'm definitely not hating it. Like it's a good read. Megan Quinn really does write emotion really well. The only thing that I tend to not like about her books are the endings, and the first two books in this series had bad endings in my opinion. Like I have not enjoyed the like years-long separation and then reuniting at the end of her books. Like it doesn't work for me. Hoping that's not the case here. And a lot of people have told me that that's something that she gets out of after the first few books in the series, but hoping that doesn't happen here. But very curious again to see like why this one is rated so highly, and I'll be curious to see too how this one stacks up to some of the other books that we're going to be reading, because this is, I think, technically the lowest rated of my highest rated reads. Yeah, so far that's where I'm at. I'm going to try to update y'all again at like 50 or 75% mark. I have another book that I'm reading tonight too, so I'm trying to like balance reading and updating for both of those. But so far so good. It's a good romance, but I need just a little bit more to kind of like push it over the top and make it like a really truly great read for me. Okay, so I am like 50% into The Perfect Catch, and I am still enjoying it. I think it's pretty good, although there's like little things that have been irritating to me, and I think it's just me being like very critical right now. Do you ever just like pick up a book and you know that if you had picked it up at a different time, you wouldn't be noticing all the stupid shit, but like because you're kind of in a bitchy mood, you do notice all the stuff? Okay, maybe not. Maybe that's just a uniquely me experience, but I've noticed a couple of times in this book like the overuse of talking about a man's erect nipples, and also the phrase arousal being used in a verbal context. Like, I understand saying arousal when it's, you know, like not the dialogue in a book, like you're talking about her arousal. I don't really like that both of our characters have used it to talk to each other. Like, she refers to herself or, you know, a certain part of her body as her slick arousal. And I'm like, who the fuck would say that in real life? Anyway, it's still, like, it's cute. Like, I'm liking it. I do like that we're seeing Walker's gooey center, for lack of a better word. Pun definitely not intended. That's gross. Moving along. It's good. The sexual tension's definitely there. We've had kind of like a sexual encounter so far, not like, you know, a full bone down sesh, but like they've kind of, you know, touched each other's bits, and it was like sufficiently hot. I was kind of impressed, and I'm curious to see more about the characters. I feel like we still haven't gotten much from Walker in terms of his background and why he is the way he is, but beyond that, like, I'm having a good time with it. Kate is really personable. She like loans Walker a book. We do know that he likes to read, which is nice. But again, we don't really know much about his family, and I know that that's kind of what is holding him back from being more vulnerable. So anyway, I'll just finish this book and let you know how I liked it, but so far, so good. Okay, my AC kicked on.
It's Texas in December and it's like 80 degrees, so please ignore that. I just finished The Perfect Catch by Megan Quinn, and I thought I would give you my thoughts while they're fresh. It was going well. It was going well at the 50% mark, and then things sort of went downhill for me. We get this, not introduction into Walker's trauma, but we do understand what happened to his sister and why his relationship with his parents is a little strained and why he dislikes Penn, who is the rival on the baseball team. I don't know if I mentioned earlier that like there is a rival on the baseball team, but I don't like what happened there. I also don't like a certain twist and reveal that happened about Kate's best friend, her best guy friend. It did not work for me. I don't want to say I don't like twists in romance. That's not entirely accurate. I just feel like this one was done pretty poorly, and I think it was just trying to give you that shock and awe factor. I also said that I don't like when Megan Quinn does time jumps. There was a time jump in this book, and there is like a third act breakup that I just felt like went on too long. It was a little bit too much of a misunderstanding thing when I feel like there should have been more communication. I don't know. I'm just disappointed in this book all around because I do feel like it had promise, and I was really excited to see more emotional depth from a Megan Quinn book. But not only was I feel like the emotional depth a little bit lacking, I also feel like some of the charm of her writing was absent. Often she is really good at creating these like fun dialogue moments and having her characters kind of connect on a deeper level. But I just feel like some of, again, that charm was missing from this book. And when I like go back and think about those things that she was trying to build in this book, I can see the attempts being made, but I just don't feel like it was as great as some of the earlier books in the series. And even that being said, like the other books in the series, like the first books, didn't work for me either. So I don't know. I'm wondering if Megan Quinn is just like not an author for me, which sucks because again, there are like hints of greatness there. I do think she's a talented writer, but I just feel like her third act breakups kind of irritate me, and this one just had too many like funky twists. So not only was this book kind of disappointing, and I understand why it's like the lowest on the list, I also just don't think it was a super great romance. If I were to rate this, it'd be 3 stars. Like, it's not a horrible book by any means. I think if you picked this up and didn't know anything about Megan Quinn's writing, like you might be able to just like overlook some of the stuff that I complain about having read a couple of her books, but it just wasn't my perfect romance, and that's okay because we have other books on this list to read. I'm gonna go ahead and pick up, I don't even know what book next. Maybe Let Me Love You. I say that. I actually don't know what I'm gonna pick up next, but next clip you'll find out with me. Okay, so I am 30% into Delilah Green Doesn't Care. This is the book that I decided to pick up after The Perfect Catch, and I'm really enjoying it. I think I said at the beginning of this video that I was curious to see how Ashley Herring Blake would do an adult romance, and I'm gonna be honest with you, like I went into this with some preconceived notions about what a middle grade / YA author could really bring to an adult romance, but I was definitely proven wrong pretty quickly. This book is already hot and steamy without there having been any sex scenes, and it is also really leaning into the romance, which I'm so appreciating. I will say there might be a little bit too much of like harder topics involved here than I usually prefer in a romance, but I'm invested. So, this story is about our main character, Delilah, who ends up going back to her small town that she grew up in to take pictures of her stepsister in her stepsister's wedding. And she's having to navigate her relationship with her stepsister and stepmother while she's there, while also like really dealing with her emotions about her childhood. She's definitely having to face some things that she's been putting off, and she's also kind of maybe falling for one of her stepsister's best friends, Claire. Claire's a really fun character because she is a bookshop owner, and she also has a daughter who's like middle school aged, who is kind of angsty and Claire doesn't totally know how to handle. So she's kind of got her own shit going on, dealing with her daughter's father and also trying to like run this bookshop and also try to get back on the horse with dating because like the last real relationship she had was with her daughter's father. And all of this is made more complicated by the fact that Claire is one of Delilah's stepsister's friends. So Delilah's been kind of hesitant to make a move on Claire past their like first initial flirting session at a bar where Claire doesn't really know who Delilah is. Like, she doesn't recognize her from their childhood. So I don't know. I'm liking the book. I am definitely believing the sexual tension between Delilah and Claire. I think that Ashley Herring Blake is a really good writer. I think my only hesitation with this story and my only beef so far is that I think it's going to be really hard to justify Astrid's actions towards Delilah. Astrid's the stepsister. I don't know if I said that, but I think it's going to be hard to justify Astrid's behavior towards Delilah and also make me understand why Claire would be
friends with Astrid in the first place and why she was kind of an ass to Delilah. I don't know, it's like, again, I'm liking the romance, I'm liking what I'm seeing here, and I definitely think once the relationship is consummated, like, I think it's gonna be hot as hell, which I'm appreciating, but I don't know if I like the kind of, I don't want to say sour mood, but this sort of just like dark cloud above the fun romance is definitely there. And I guess I should have expected it because Ashley Herring Blake does not shy away from the harder topics, but I would be excited to see her writing something like this, but just kind of like a fun rom-com. I really feel like she could be up there with like my favorite rom-com writers if like this was more rom-com-y. Does that make sense? I don't know. I don't think this is going to be an issue for everybody. I just tend to like light and frothy reads, so just thought I'd put that out there. I'm gonna get a little farther into this book, probably like the 50 or 75% mark, and then I will get back to you on my deeper thoughts. Okay, so I am 50% into Delilah Green Doesn't Care. I'm still enjoying it. Don't know, again, like what my overall feelings are, because I do think that the harder topics are being explored in a way that I'm enjoying. I don't know if I said this in my last update, but a big kind of plot point here is that Astrid, Delilah's stepsister, is getting married to a guy that no one seems to like. He doesn't treat her well at all. They are kind of colluding, Claire, Delilah, and Iris is another of Astrid's friends, to get Astrid to see that maybe this guy is not one she should marry. And I am liking it, although I feel like this book is lacking some of the levity that I feel like it needs. I think I kind of mentioned that last update, but it's a book that I think is definitely well thought out. I do like that the steamier moments have been steamy, and I'm excited to see Delilah and Claire get together, but I just wanted it to be, again, a little bit more upbeat and fun, and that's just like on me, right? Like, I went into this maybe with some preconceived notions, though again, knowing Ashley Herring Blake, I should have known that it would be like this, but yeah, I'm lacking some of the fun and like spontaneity that I've come to enjoy in rom-coms, so I could definitely see this still being like a 4-star read for me, but I think my personal preference for romance makes this to where I don't think it's going to be a 5-star read for me, which is kind of sad because like it's a good book. I like happy shit, what can I say? Fiction is escapism, and I wanted something just like maybe a little bit happier. I don't know. I'm gonna keep reading. I don't really have any like big updates for you. It's kind of just going on in the same vein that it has been, but I'm curious to see if they're successful in getting Astrid not to marry this guy, and you know what it's gonna look like when Delilah and Claire get together. So I'm gonna keep reading. I'll get back to you when I'm finished. Okay, so I finished Delilah Green Doesn't Care, and I can't give this a 4-star. I'm gonna be honest with you, it's definitely a 3-star read for me. I feel bad saying that because it's obvious that a lot of care went into crafting this story. I think there are a lot of components here that are gonna work for people, but I think as a romance, this didn't really deliver. There were 2 main issues that I had. One was the romance that didn't deliver. I feel like we had these sexual interactions and we had a lot of chemistry between our 2 heroines, but I don't feel like there were enough interactions between the 2 of them for this to be a convincing story, right? And maybe it's just because I just finished a Mariana Zapata story that was entirely too long and like drawn out, but I can appreciate the way that she really hones in on characters' needs and wants and connects characters based on that. I didn't really feel like the needs and wants between Claire and Delilah were aligned, and I think a big part of that honestly is the fact that, you know, Delilah has these dreams of staying in New York and like being really good at what she does, like being a photographer and, you know, living in the art world, and Claire has no intention of moving. Like, she likes her small town life with her daughter, and sure, they come to an agreement and they end up in a relationship, but it did feel like there was some sacrifice that was unearned there. Like, I didn't appreciate that, and typically I don't like that in stories, and to me that's a bigger part of that whole conversation of I don't feel like they were well aligned. I'm not saying that like personality wise they couldn't have made it work, but when the desires of the 2 characters are so different, I just don't understand how the romance could work. I like a puzzle piece romance. This is not a puzzle piece romance. And then the other issue that I had with the book was that there was so much emphasis on the relationship between Astrid and Delilah and her stepmom that just never really got resolved. I mean, there was a moment at the end of the book where Delilah has interactions with Astrid and they kind of put things out there on the table, I guess. Kind of. It didn't really feel satisfying in any way to me. It's like, why was so much time spent on this if it's not going to have a heartwarming and delightful resolution? I don't know. Overall, I'm just like, I'm frustrated because the writing was good, the angst was good, I was just waiting for all of the pieces to kind of come together, but I think they just didn't for me. Wouldn't hesitate to recommend this story to people, but it's just not one that I think is like my perfect romance, and that sucks because this was so promising as like a really awesome queer romance, but it just didn't 100% work for me, which, you know, I was interested to see how this would measure up given, you know, that this book isn't published yet and it's got such a high rating on Goodreads. And I think in this case, it's really just a matter of not very many people have read this book, and the people that have are early reviewers. Ratings tend to skew higher before the book's published, so I'm hoping people really enjoy this book. I would love to read more in this series, but this first one just didn't totally work for me, so I feel weird now about this video. Not weird, but I was just expecting all of these to be like knocked out of the park, just as amazing as the video that's coming in 2 days, where I read your favorite books of 2021. That has been so successful, and I just assumed this one would be equally successful since I'm going off of Goodreads ratings, and like, I know Goodreads ratings are not like foolproof, but typically if something's 4 stars or above, like, I have a pretty good time with it, but I just haven't been that impressed with these past 2 romances. So I think I'm going to switch gears and start in on Amari and the Night Brothers. I mean, this is a completely different kind of book, right? Like, it's a middle grade story, and I have high hopes for it. This is one that I would be surprised and kind of honestly upset if it wasn't like a 4 or 5 star read. I'm going to be honest with you, I really just want to take a shower. So I think my plan is to get to the 50% mark in this book tonight and then update you tomorrow on it. So that's the plan. Wish me luck in my endeavors, you know, to wash my hair and also to read this book. I'll be back. Okay, so I am 50% into Amari and the Night Brothers, and I am enjoying it. This book is about our main character, Amari, as she tries to find out what happened to her brother. At the very beginning of the story, she is invited to join the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs, which we know that her brother was a part of, and her whole intention of going there in the first place is just to find her brother, but she ends up getting caught up in all of the magic and in her own journey as well. We find out pretty quickly that Amari has powers that have never really been seen before, or like the amount of power that's never really been seen before, and she also has a power that people are scared of. So she's trying to figure out what this power means for her and for her future, and she's also trying to kind of wade through all of the bullshit and find out what happened to her brother. Her brother was a part of a duo that both went missing as they were trying to investigate kind of like famous criminals in this world, and the duo went missing. So she's like, I gotta find out what happened to them. Everybody's being very cagey and like won't give her information on it, and she's also only like 12 or 13, so I mean, like, even if they did have information, they wouldn't be giving it to her. So it's a lot of fun so far. We have Amari in like the recent past. I say recent past. At this 50% mark, she has found someone who has similar abilities to her, and now she feels a little bit less alone. I think they're going to team up perhaps and figure out what happened to her brother. So, you know, I know that most of that's in the synopsis of this book. I feel like I can't really share too much without spoiling the story, but it's really fun. I like the pacing of this book a lot. It doesn't, you know, drag, and it's not drawn out. I was really curious how the beginning of this book would be, if it was going to be a slow burn, and if what's in the synopsis would happen later on in the book, but it happens really early on, and we have all kinds of adventure going on so far. It's just reminding me how much I love middle grade. I haven't read one since, I want to say, I don't know if I read any middle grade in 2021. Wow. I haven't read middle grade in a long time, so getting to pick this up is just so fun. And, you know, Hayden and I were recently talking about fantasy in the different, like, age demographics, I guess you could say. I feel like YA fantasy is really bogged down with the romance. Adult fantasy, I feel like, can be just very dark, but middle grade is just fun. You know, it's fun. The magic is usually really not inventive necessarily, but just interesting and kind of silly, and I'm having a really good time with this. There are so many different kinds of magical creatures, and there's like humor in the story. It's kind of everything that I'm needing right now, and I'm having a good time with it. I don't know if this is going to be a 5-star read for me, because I don't feel like there's a whole lot of depth to it, not in a bad way, but it seems like the middle grade stories I tend to connect with the most also have a kind of like emotional thread throughout, and this one doesn't really seem to have one. Like, yes, Amari's trying to find her brother, but it's not really like gripping me in that way. I just like care about the magical world, and like, yes, I want to find out what happened to her brother, but it's more like leaning on the mystery side of things rather than the emotional side of things, which again is not bad, but I just don't know if it's going to pull a 5-star out of me, so we'll see. But definitely I would say 4-star material, because it's really fun. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this up. I will get back to you, and then we can talk about Reel. I've started it already. I was in the car today with Hayden. We were going to pick up some breakfast tacos, and I got to listen to about an hour of Reel, so I already have thoughts on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this, and I'll be back. Okay, so after a long ass nap, I finished Amari and the Night Brothers, and this was great.
I really enjoyed the story. Like I predicted in the last clip, I think I'm going to give it 4 stars. I liked the climax of the story, I liked the tension, and I liked the reveal, even though I could see it coming from a mile away. I'm curious to see what happens in this series in general. I don't know if I'm going to pick up the next book, mostly because of a thing that I'm doing next year. I might eventually pick up the next book, but since I don't own it currently, I don't know if I'll be getting to it soon. But this was fun, and I really would recommend this to lovers of middle grade or people who just want a fantasy that feels fun and isn't bogged down again with like half-baked romance or with like really dark themes. I think this is a book that you might really enjoy. So I like this a lot, and I'm definitely going to be keeping this on my shelves to hopefully loan out to friends and or maybe read to my kid one day. So anyway, this was fun, and I definitely understand why it is highly rated. It definitely deserves the high rating, which I don't want to say that I can't say of the last 2 books, but they're just not books that I connected with so much. This one I did. A book that I have started, and I think I already told you I started, is Real by Kennedy Ryan, and I think we're just on this upward trajectory, y'all. I think things are just getting better and better. This book is so good. I picked up the audiobook as Hayden and I were going to get breakfast tacos this morning, and I didn't want to put it down. I was not super looking forward to the reading experience for some reason. I just knew it was going to be really long, and then when I saw the audiobook was like not a full cast, but like, you know, had quite a few different voice actors in it, I figured, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. It was kind of an expensive audiobook, but I just went for it. The story is about Neva and Cannon, and before I went into this book, I just assumed that it was going to be set during the Harlem Renaissance, but it's actually set in modern day. Neva is an actress in Cannon's film about a woman during the Harlem Renaissance. It's a biopic, I think, and Neva, even though she doesn't have much acting experience, she pretty much has just done Broadway for the most part. She gets selected for this role because Cannon sees something in her, and now they have to kind of like fight their attraction for each other. I just feel like so much in this book is done right. Very early on, we get the kind of, not reveal, but we understand that Cannon had a relationship with one of his actresses in like one of the first movies that he ever did. Directed, I think. Yeah, he's director. One of the first movies that he ever directed, and that kind of tanked the movie. He ended up getting pulled off of the film. Someone else took over, and it like did really, really poorly. And he looks back on that experience and is like, I'm never gonna let this happen again. And so now he's having to fight his attraction for Neva, and I feel like that was an earned thing, right? I just feel like so often in a romance novel, even though there are like forbidden aspects and like that's a common conflict, it usually does not feel earned. It's like, oh, we can't be together because we're coworkers, and it's like, okay, who gives a fuck? Like, I need some reason why this wouldn't work, and knowing that Cannon's past is like that, you're like, okay, that makes sense. With Neva, it's like, okay, well, she's a fresh actress, and if she gets in a relationship with a director, like, that's probably not gonna look good, and she cares about her burgeoning acting career. So, I don't know, the tension feels earned here, and also just the development of the relationship is, oh, it's fucking awesome. It's been a while since I've read a Kennedy Ryan book, and I'm just like kind of slapping myself at this point because she just writes so well. I'm only 30% in, and I can totally buy this romance. You know, it was sort of like an attraction, kind of an attraction at first sight thing, but Cannon is kind of grumpy and a little bit short in his responses to Neva at first, and then you can kind of see him slowly warming to her, and there's a scene where they're on the phone together. He keeps talking to her even though his like initial phone call was just gonna be like, hey, I'm telling you this one thing, and then hang up or whatever. He just stays on the phone because he's like, I just like this girl a lot. Like, you can hear his internal dialogue about it. Something that I kind of mentioned was the audio book narrators. There is one for the main character in the biopic because we're getting like slices of her life in it. Her name is Desi Blue, and the voice actress for Desi is different than the voice actress for Neva, and there's also a voice actress for the singing parts for Desi, which is so fucking cool. Like, I got chills listening to one of the songs she was singing, so I don't know, it's been a really good listening experience, and overall the story is just awesome, and I totally understand the hype for this one. I had heard kind of whisperings about it, but yeah, I hadn't picked it up, and I'm glad that I have. I don't know when this book came out, if it was this year or last year, but I know that it wasn't in the Goodreads Choice Awards, which is upsetting because I can tell you right now it's better than a lot of the books that were nominated. So just another annoyance, I guess, at the lack of indies. I don't know for sure that this is an indie book, but I'm like pretty freaking sure that it's an indie. So probably update you at like the 70% mark since I'm at the 30% mark now. But you should pick this book up. I'm just gonna say it right now, just pick it up. I like how it looks like I have not like moved from this spot. I've actually done a lot of things since we last spoke, but most importantly, I'm 70% into Real by Kennedy Ryan, and I'm loving it. It's so good. I just feel like all of the conflicts in this book are handled so well. There's not a lot of melodrama here. The conflicts feel important and yet not melodramatic. I don't really know how else to say it. Obviously, there can be a lot of drama if if your relationship is revealed and you're like scared about it being revealed. But the way that Canon and Neva have kind of like navigated their relationship being public when they didn't necessarily want it to be has been really nice. And also Neva's relationship with her sister, which is a pretty big conflict in this book, has been handled pretty realistically. Like I'm just loving it. And then, I mean, obviously the relationship is so just delightful and sweet and warm and supportive. The way that Canon is characterized is so lovely. Like, I just love a grumpy hero that also just really takes note of the heroine and the things that she enjoys. There's a scene where they're like, having their first night together, and he just notices so much about her. Like, he noticed that she doesn't eat red meat and that she really likes fish, so he like buys salmon to cook for her that first night they're together, and just like little things like that. His attention to detail when it comes to it fits his character really well, and it also is just sweet. I'm having a good time. And I posted this on my Instagram, but I just don't know how the fuck this wasn't a Goodreads Choice Award nominee. I think I said that in the last clip too, but I mean it, so I'm gonna say it again. I don't have much to say, honestly, at this point, because it's, progressing in a way that I'm enjoying, and I feel like that's all you need to know. It's good, and I like it, and I'm gonna finish it. I'm curious to see, though, because at the 75% mark, the relationship is revealed and nothing has really come of it yet, so I'm wondering if there's going to be an even bigger conflict that comes up, and if so, what it would be. We are getting hints of a chronic illness flare-up from Neva, and I'm assuming that's probably going to kind of play into it, but I don't know if that's going to be the main conflict in the book. So yeah, I don't know. All the pieces are like coming together so beautifully, and now I'm like, okay, well shit, I'm going to put Kennedy Ryan's entire backlist on my to-do for 2022. I have read 2 of the 3 books in the Grip series, and I have read Longshot, but she has other books obviously that I need to check out, so I'm learning things. I'm learning things today. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and finish this book, and I will get back to you tomorrow morning bright and early, and then we can start in on Let Me Love You. And I'll tell you right now, I've actually already started it, and I'm liking it too. Hello, good morning. I just finished Real by Kennedy Ryan, and this book was so fantastic. Like, I think if you're looking for a truly romantic romance, this is definitely going to fit the bill. I think on like a steaminess scale, this one isn't super high. There definitely are sex scenes, but I wouldn't call this like a really smutty romance. It really is a romantic romance. And if you're looking for something that is just beautiful in its prose and not in like an overly descriptive way, but just in a delightfully romantic way, I think you need to pick this up. Like, it was just so good. And while the story within a story was fictional, it was based off of the lives of a lot of Black women during the Harlem Renaissance. Yeah, you can tell so much research went into this story, and I just loved it. Canon was such a swoony hero. Like, wow. Okay. Pick this book up. The only thing that I would warn you of, I guess you could say, would be if you're someone who is currently struggling with chronic illness and that's a trigger for you, I would say steer clear of this book. If it's something that you think is cathartic, I would say pick this book up, because it is very, I would say, realistic in its depiction of chronic illness, and yet there's, hope in there too. I feel like you need to pick it up. It was a 5-star read. I totally understand why this one was rated so highly, and I'm gonna say it for a 3rd time. I'm so sorry, but this should have been in the Goodreads Choice Awards. So moving on, I am 30% into Let Me Love You by Alexandria House, and it is also going really, really well. This story is about Jo, who is a single mom. She has recently divorced her husband, who I think cheated on her. He's just sort of a shitty dude, and he continues to like come back into Jo's life, but also doesn't really want anything to do with their 2-year-old daughter. And at the same time, she is working as an apprentice to a jeweler, and he is such a douchebag. Like, he just treats her like shit. And in working for him, she kind of develops a relationship with a guy who is a client of the guy she's apprenticing under, Big South, aka Everett, who's a rapper. And she doesn't really want anything to do with him because she thinks like he doesn't respect women based on some of his early music. But the more that he, romances her, the more that she understands maybe a lot of this is just persona, and maybe he is a good guy underneath it all. Everett is dealing with his ex. He was married to a woman for a little while who's, I think, like 18 years his senior or something like that, like much older than him. And he has a daughter with her, and, he is trying to be in his daughter's life while also not having to deal with his ex-wife, who treated him pretty shitty. So there's definitely a lot of drama, and I'm wondering if that's going to kind of come up in the story. But right now we're just in like the early stages of the courtship between Everett and Jo, and I like it. It's just a really good romance. It's very swoony. I think some of the reviews on Goodreads said this is sort of insta-lovey, and I could kind of see how you would think that, but I think for me it's just like there was an instant attraction there, and they're exploring that attraction. Like, yes, they started kind of flirting and dating early on in the story, but they haven't like jumped in bed together, and they're not saying like I love you or anything like super early on in the book. So I'm having a good time with it. I'm glad that I am finishing this video out on a high note, because the first 2 books were just kind of okay for me, but these past 3 have just been awesome. So I'm gonna continue reading this book. I'll probably update you at the 70% mark, but so far so good. Okay, so I finished Let Me Love You by Alexandria House. I really enjoyed it. I know that I said I was going to update you at the 70% mark, but I had a feeling that my thoughts wouldn't be solidified until I finished the book, and having finished the book, I still feel that way. This story, I thought it was really interesting. I tend to question when stories have 2 characters getting together really early on, because I wonder how much of the rest of the story is going to be drama, and in this case there definitely were quite a few conflicts, but I didn't really see it as drama. I felt like the conflicts that were in this book were things that a lot of people have to overcome in a relationship. We have meddling exes, we have relationships between parent and child, and then them having to deal with like a new step parent coming into the picture. There are, I don't know, there's a couple of different conflicts that happen in the book. I don't want to spoil it, but I really appreciated how strong the relationship was between Everett and Jo. I really liked them together, and overall it was just like a solid romance. It was definitely very steamy and hot, but on top of that, the romance I feel like was fairly well developed. I think if I were to rate this book, which I mean, I always say that, like if I were to rate this book, I am rating this book, I would give it 4 stars. It was a good, solid romance. It's not something that I feel like I'm going to be thinking about for years and years to come, but if I were like scrolling through my Goodreads looking for a book that like fit a particular trope, I would not hesitate to recommend it to people. So enjoyed it. It's not an all-time favorite, but like it was very good. I think I kind of did this book a disservice a little bit reading it after Real, because Real was just in a class of its own, right? Like it was just so good. Both of these books are really good, but obviously Real like beats it out. So now that I'm finished reading all of the books, let me show you kind of like the rating order that we kind of went through on this side. And then on this side, I will show you kind of like how I'm ranking the books. So for me, obviously Real is number 1. Then I think I'm going to do Amari and the Night Brothers. I think I liked that one just a little bit more than Let Me Love You. They're both 4 stars, but I think Amari was just a little bit better, and then Let Me Love You. After that, I think I'm going to do Delilah Green, because I think it is an important book, and even though it didn't perfectly work for me in terms of like relationship development, there was like a lot of goodness there. And then lastly, I'm going to have to do The Perfect Catch, which is funny. I love how I started off with the book that I disliked the most, but yeah, I'm not noticing much of a pattern in terms of like my rankings versus the ratings that people have on Goodreads. I don't know if there's an important lesson to be drawn from this, but I'm glad that I got to read all of the highest rated books on my TBR, because none of these just like absolutely sucked, and it's nice to get to indulge in some solid books every once in a while. I feel like most of my videos are just me bitching, but this one and the one you're going to see in 2 days are basically me just being mostly happy the entire time. But thanks so much for watching. I love y'all so much, and until tomorrow.